Behind the doors of an ordinary suburban home in Chelmsford, Essex, lay one of the most disturbing secrets in modern British crime. For years, nobody knew. Neighbors thought it was just a quiet family living inside. Bills were paid, curtains stayed drawn, and nothing seemed unusual. But in reality, two elderly parents were dead. Their daughter, the very person who was supposed to love and care for them, had murdered them. If you're still watching, you know how gripping this case is. Subscribe now and be part of a community that never looks away from the truth. And here's the chilling part. She didn't just kill them. She lived alongside their decomposing remains for 4 long years, pretending nothing had happened. This is the gruesome and unforgettable case of Virginia McCullough, a daughter who turned a family home into a house of horrors. To outsiders, the McCullough family appeared ordinary, blameless, forgettable, just another name on the list of thousands of families living in Essex. Virginia lived with her parents John and Elizabeth McCullough in their modest home. Her father, John, had once been a respected figure, and her mother, Elizabeth, was known to be kind but private. Virginia herself, however, was troubled. She struggled with personal problems, gambling debts, and a sense of failure. Yet nobody expected what would come next. In 2019, something inside Virginia snapped. The details remain chillingly vague, but one thing is certain: she killed both her parents. The method of murder has never been fully disclosed to the public. Police reports remain sealed, and trial coverage kept some details hidden. But the result was undeniable. Both John and Elizabeth were dead. And instead of calling the police, instead of confessing, instead of even arranging a burial, Virginia made a choice that would shock the nation. She left their bodies where they fell. The murder itself was horrifying. But what came after was almost beyond belief. For 4 long years, Virginia continued living inside the same house with the decaying remains of her parents. Neighbors later described how the curtains were almost always closed. No one saw the parents again. But strangely, nobody asked too many questions. Bills were still being paid. The house didn't look abandoned. And so life went on. What they didn't know was that Virginia had turned the family home into a tomb. During those years, she continued drawing money, reportedly using her parents' pensions to fuel her gambling addiction. It wasn't just murder, it was a cold, calculated cover-up. Imagine the silence of that house. Imagine walking past 2 lifeless bodies every single day and doing nothing. That's the part that chilled investigators the most. Virginia didn't just kill. She adjusted. She adapted. She lived as if the crime had never happened. By 2023, whispers began spreading. Neighbors noticed something wasn't right. The McCullough parents hadn't been seen in years. Some suspected they were ill, maybe in a care home. But there were no visits. No updates. No goodbyes. Finally, someone raised the alarm. Police arrived at the Essex property in September 2023. At first glance, everything looked normal: a quiet suburban home, curtains drawn, garden overgrown. But when officers stepped inside, they were hit with the undeniable stench of death. Half the story is shocking, but the other half will leave you speechless. Subscribe now so you'll be here when the truth is revealed. What they found would haunt them forever. Inside the house were the decomposed remains of John and Elizabeth McCullough. For years old, hidden in plain sight. Virginia, calm and detached, was arrested immediately. When questioned, she didn't deny it. She admitted killing her parents in 2019. She admitted living with the bodies. She admitted pretending everything was normal. But even then, she showed little remorse. The case shocked Britain not only because of the murders, but because of the bizarre double life Virginia had been living. How could anyone coexist with the corpses of their own parents for years? At the Chelmsford police station, Virginia sat across from detectives. To their surprise, she wasn't frantic, emotional, or defensive. She was calm. Almost too calm. When asked why she killed her parents, she gave vague answers. She claimed life at home had become unbearable, that tensions boiled over. But investigators suspected more sinister motives. Financial records revealed that Virginia had been living off her parents' pensions since 2019. She withdrew thousands of pounds over the years, gambling heavily both online and in local betting shops. To detectives, the picture became clear. Virginia didn't just lose control in a moment of anger. She had kept the secret going for 4 long years because it benefited her. But what baffled officers most wasn't just the murder or the fraud, it was her ability to live so normally among death. When asked about coexisting with the decomposing remains, Virginia simply shrugged. It was the kind of cold detachment you'd expect from a horror film villain, not a daughter. In 2023, Virginia McCullough stood trial at Chelmsford Crown Court. The charges were heavy, 2 counts of murder. The prosecution painted her as manipulative, greedy, and disturbingly cold. They argued that she murdered her parents in order to fund her gambling and then lived with the bodies to keep the deception going. Neighbors testified about the eerie quietness of the house. One said, "We thought maybe they'd moved to a care home. It never occurred to us they were still inside." The defense, however, tried to portray Virginia as mentally fragile, claiming she had a breakdown, that she wasn't thinking rationally when she committed the murders. They suggested she was overwhelmed by personal struggles. But the jury wasn't swayed. The evidence was clear. The timeline was damning, and her own confession sealed her fate. In 2024, Virginia McCullough was sentenced to life imprisonment. The judge called the case one of the most disturbing he had ever seen. News of the case spread quickly across the UK. Headlines branded it the House of Secrets and the Essex House of Horror. People couldn't comprehend how a daughter could do this to her own parents. It wasn't just the act of murder that stunned the public, it was the prolonged cover-up. For 4 years, birthdays passed. Christmases came and went. Family milestones were ignored. Friends never heard from John and Elizabeth again. Yet Virginia carried on as though nothing had happened. Social media exploded with outrage. Many asked, how could nobody have noticed? How did the system fail to check on 2 pensioners who suddenly disappeared? The case became a chilling reminder that behind closed doors, even the most ordinary homes can hide the darkest of secrets. Crime scene investigators later revealed the conditions inside the McCullough home. The remains of John and Elizabeth had been left untouched for years. Time and decomposition had erased much of the physical evidence of how they were killed. But the atmosphere of the house was unforgettable. One officer described it as like walking into a mausoleum that nobody had cared for. Dust-covered furniture, closed curtains, a house frozen in time except for the unmistakable presence of death. Forensic experts had to wear protective suits and masks just to move through the property. The discovery left some investigators needing counseling afterward. To this day, the exact motive behind the killings is still debated. Was it pure greed, a way for Virginia to live off her parents' money? Was it resentment, built up after years of dependency and frustration? Or was it something darker, something inside her that snapped? Psychologists studying the case have called Virginia an extreme example of familicide, the killing of family members by someone in the household. But unlike many such cases which end in immediate arrest, Virginia prolonged the horror by keeping the bodies hidden. This wasn't just murder. It was manipulation, a twisted form of survival. When the sentence was read, Virginia showed little emotion. No tears, no pleas, no signs of regret. Her punishment, a life sentence with a minimum term set by the judge. She will likely spend the rest of her life behind bars, cut off from the outside world. For the people of Essex, the case remains unforgettable. The quiet neighborhood where it happened is still haunted by the memory. The house has since been sealed and investigated, but neighbors say it will forever be the house where the daughter lived with the dead. The Virginia McCullough case is one of those true crime stories that burrows into your mind and refuses to leave. Not just because of the act of murder, but because of the 4 years of silence that followed. It reminds us of the fragility of trust within families, of how greed, desperation, or darkness can destroy the very bonds that should be unbreakable. John and Elizabeth McCullough deserved dignity. They deserved respect. Instead, their final years were erased, hidden behind closed curtains, and exploited by the very person who should have protected them. If you thought this case was intense, wait until you hear the next one. Subscribe now so you never miss a single detail. This is why the case will never be forgotten. Because it forces us to ask, if such horrors can unfold in the quiet suburbs of Essex, what secrets might still be hidden in the houses around us?